Greetings, hoopheads, and welcome back to the Jersey Jump Shot Podcast, where we eat, sleep, and breathe college basketball in the great Garden State. I'm Jerry Carino, and over the past several weeks, you've heard from players from 6 different New Jersey programs on this podcast. Today, we're going to go off the court and talk shop with Jersey's first college basketball general manager, Rutgers Rob Sullivan. Rob was a guard on St. Joe's legendary 2003-04 squad. I know you remember it. They made the Elite Eight, and they were ranked number 1 in the nation for a spell. He's worked at St. Joe's athletic department in a variety of roles, and he's also spent time at a sports agency. He's a Philly guy adjusting to Jersey life. Rob Sullivan, welcome to Jersey Jump Shot.
Jerry, appreciate you having me. Excited for this conversation. Thank you.
Let's go back to your hoop roots, your hooper roots, Rob. And what was it like going against Jameer Nelson in practice?
Well, Jameer had an incredible approach, Jerry. So he had an awesome purpose at practice, but also he had a great personality. So Jameer could always make every teammate feel welcome, ready to rock that day. And as you can imagine, there's layers to this stuff. So when Jameer wanted to turn it on in practice, he did. An incredible leader. He led with his voice. He led by example. And most importantly, Jameer held everybody accountable, 1 through 15. And when you stepped in between those lines, it was business. But he just had an uncanny ability to make every player on the team feel very empowered. And the 2 best compliments I could give a guy like Jameer was he was a great teammate and he's a better person than he ever was basketball player.
Well, that
just
matters.
An incredible
for
guy
sure.
on and
that
off the
matters. Phil Martelli, who I've gotten to know a little bit, he's in broadcasting now, which seems like he was totally made for. What was it like playing for him? Give me a classic, Phil Martelli coaching story.
Great question. A classic Coach Martelli story. I'm going to take you back to that 2004 season. So we finish off the regular season 27-0. And then in the Atlantic 10 tournament, we lose in the first round to Xavier. And honestly, Xavier went to the Elite Eight that year. But,
Right.
Being 27-0 and losing in the first round A10 tournament in Dayton was, a seismic shift for the regular season that we had. So now the Selection Sunday show comes on. We hosted at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. It's packed, a couple thousand folks there to see the Selection Sunday show. So a lot of chatter was going on across the country if we were going to be a number 1 seed or would we drop a seed line because of that recent loss in the A10 tournament.
Right.
So we eventually do get the 4th number 1 seed, and Billy Packer had some critiques that
I remember that.
Were we deserving of the number 1 seed, based on the our competition during the season, Atlantic 10 Conference, just losing in the A10, etc. So in true Coach Martelli fashion, his first interview, his quote was, "To be perfectly blunt, Billy Packer can kiss my," and you can fill in the blank from there. And as you know, in Philly, we are a very provincial crew. We protect our own.
No
and
doubt.
In that moment and throughout Coach Martelli's legendary career, he always protected the program. And for us, as the players and the team, he empowered us. And from a standpoint, we were like, yeah, no, we do belong as a number 1 seed. We are one of the best teams in America, and we're going to prove it. And Coach Martelli was our champion, And from that standpoint, we went on to get to the Elite Eight, lost on that buzzer beater by John Lucas against Oklahoma State. But that's a classic Phil story because that was the type of guy, leader, and coach that he was. Just an awesome human being.
You mentioned Alumni Fieldhouse, and I've been to Hagen a few times. I regret never having gotten to Alumni before they expanded it. What was that place like at its peak?
Wow. Whew, the field house, loud,
3,000
hot,
seats, right?
3,200, standing room only. And when, we were in the midst of, especially that 2004 season, et cetera, the place shook when there was a big moment in there, and you knew it was probably, we were probably against fire marshal standards. People were any and everywhere. They're opening up windows to get some airflow in there, but an incredible home court advantage, and honestly a great place to play and watch college hoops.
Now you have experienced and witnessed a little bit of some rack magic, right? Oregon, Northwestern, those wins by Rutgers sort of, I think, can give you a little idea of what level that place can get up to. It's one of the best home court advantages in all of high major basketball. What do you think of the home court potential there? How does it strike you as someone who was weaned on a place like Alumni Fieldhouse?
Yeah, definitely many synergies and similarities. I've witnessed it, especially the Northwestern game, Oregon, Jersey Mike's Arena, formerly known as the Rack. It gets loud. The fans are right on top of you, and it is a distinct home court advantage. And I do think, you never want to lose that magic. And, if I compare it back to, the field house, the difference is it's twice the size. So,
Right.
it's that's a major difference. So when you have more voices, more noise, the opposition feels it. And I love the fact that the crowd's right on top of you. Very knowledgeable fan base. They're loyal as heck. They're loud, cheer for their team. And it definitely gives a boost, not only to the players, but everybody associated with the program.
I would say the Rack, and you have to call it Jersey Mike's Arena. I'm going to call it the Rack. It has so the Northwestern and Oregon games. I would say it got up to about a 7 of a 10 of its potential. So, and which was good. A 7's great. I mean, it was a blast in there, but that just gives you an idea of how many levels that place can go up to, and maybe we'll see at some point soon. Once again, let's go back. Let's go dive into a little bit of the job now, the general manager job, roster building principles. What was sort of the philosophy at St. Joe's? Like, was there an overriding principle, or what was the workflow like between you and Billy Lang? Tell me a little bit about how the general manager job worked at St. Joe's.
Yeah, absolutely. Our overall strategy was a simple formula. It was recruiting plus retention equals results. And, at St. Joe's, from a standpoint of our roster building, we were a program that was rooted in player development for a holistic student athlete experience, where we wanted guys to develop and improve their mind, body, spirit, and skill. So with that, we knew that if we recruited the right guys on the front end, especially scholastically, and they stayed with us, they were going to get better. And, we take great pride in players like Eric Reynolds II, where he was recruited out of high school. He had every opportunity to transfer
Right.
or chase more NIL money. He stayed loyal to St. Joe's. The Hawk Hill community loved him back. He ends his college career as the all-time leading scorer in St. Joe's history, surpassing Jameer Nelson. We take
Yeah,
great pride in that, and honestly, Billy and I, along with many others associated with the program, we wanted to build a brand, a style of play, have an identity for St. Joe's basketball in this new era of college athletics. So, with that, it was very comprehensive and robust conversations, brainstorming, spitballing with Billy about, hey, what do we want? How can we get there? And what type of skills do we need? And it was different each off season. One off season, hey, we felt we needed to really get better shooting. So we went into, the transfer portal and wanted to get some shooters. Another off season, it was about, hey, we thought we needed some better offensive players that could play off a live dribble. Most recently, it was about depth, and we took, different observations and evaluations and assessments from the NBA and the NBA Finals. And we saw last season about Oklahoma City Thunder and Indiana Pacers playing a lot of players. We
right.
wanted to take all of those factors into account. So, this past off season, entering the 25-26 campaign, that was a major emphasis. It was about depth. And the overarching theme, at St. Joe's was we had a very intentional approach to who we wanted to bring in and why.
So Rasheer Fleming is in the NBA now. Like, how did he come on board, and when did you know you had an NBA player on your hands?
So Rasheer, scholastic recruit, definitely had Division I offers. We were probably one of the higher profiled programs and conferences that were recruiting Rasheer, and it was really just based on he was playing on two awesome programs, scholastically at Camden High, and also with the NJ Scholars on the EYBL circuit. So,
Right.
in the recruiting process, I really do think the basketball matters, and Billy and the staff found Rasheer. We loved his measurables to start, his length, 7'5" wingspan. And also Rasheer just played the game at the right way, and even when he wasn't getting the most minutes as it relates to his scholastic or grassroots career, you know, the little plays, offensive rebounding, tip dunks, had the ability to defend multiple positions. That was evident when we saw Rasheer as a young player. So after he committed to St. Joe's, he just continually improved and got better. So when he came, he had a really strong freshman year, and the chatter started about, hey, we think he could be a pro prospect, and a lot of that was about his metrics and measurables, like I shared
Right.
earlier. 7'5" wingspan, had the ability to defend really 1 through 5. Showed promise and potential to be a knockdown shooter. Well, progressively from his freshman to sophomore to junior season, he just had incredible development. And his sophomore into junior year, he went to a national camp hosted by Dame Lillard with a ton of other, pro prospects, and he showed really well.
And you kept him
So
there. And you kept him there. I mean, that's the thing. Is you
yeah,
guys kept him there.
and that goes back to that overall strategy and mentality that we had at St. Joe's. It was, we recruited the right guys. If we could get them to stay and retain them, we thought we were going to have some really good results. And Rasheer is a prime example of that. And most importantly, Rasheer's an unbelievable guy. And I couldn't wish anything more for a better person than Rasheer Fleming. He's going to have
Yeah.
a tremendous NBA career, but just another example that we take great pride in at St. Joe's. He was recruited well, he was retained, and he continued to develop and improve.
I do feel like, Rob, there's a correlation between being a good guy and some of the loyalty that comes into play when you're trying to retain guys. Of course, there's going to be, it's more than just sheer loyalty, but loyalty has to be, I think, a part of that equation. And maybe when you're recruiting good guys, that plays into that decision to stick around, or to really give your school a chance to keep you around. Since your arrival at Rutgers, Rob, in the fall, what have you been doing? What have you been focusing on? Like, what's the job of a GM as we're all watching the games? What are you doing?
Yeah, so in my first 2 months, I should probably start with my transition. Forever grateful and appreciative from the folks at St. Joe's, just as I was closing that chapter, and they were awesome in the transition. The Rutgers community has welcomed me and my family so incredibly well. And I share that context, Jerry, because it really allowed me to settle into the job, in my first couple months. So the transition was as smooth and seamless as I could have asked. And as I was going through the interview process, I shared a deck with Kelly and Coach Pikiell and Coach Washington that I felt like I needed the first 2 months to really get assimilated, acclimated to just a new place, a new
Right.
setting, a new environment. So when the new year hit, I would really be able to, go full throttle, go full steam ahead, and really understand, through my lens, the needs of both the men's and women's basketball program at Rutgers. So in that first 2 months, it's been a heavy dose and primary focus on our current rosters, as it relates to really evaluating, assessing through a neutral lens, the basketball players on each program's roster, just to see what we have, what I feel like we need. And also there's just, continuous daily dialogue with both head coaches about, where we're currently at. and then, hey, what are we going to need to do moving forward? So as I'm doing that internally with the, constant evaluation of our current rosters, the other piece is it's all about relationship management, keeping in touch with my complete basketball network, letting them know, my new role at Rutgers, where we feel we are right now, where we may need to add some pieces in the portal, et cetera. And really just staying in touch with everybody that we got to be there before we get there. So taking a very just prepared and organized approach with all my different peers, colleagues in the business, and really just primarily focusing on the basketball.
Rob, when you mentioned your basketball network, I'm sure that includes people you met during your time at the sports agency and agents. And when it comes to this stuff, how important are the relationships you have in that field when it comes to the job you're gonna have to do come March and April?
Yeah, I think it's critical. It's not the only thing that matters, but honestly, Jerry, in this new era of college athletics and specifically in our landscape of basketball, everything matters. The relationships with agents matter, the fit matters, the basketball matters, the NIL matters,
Right.
the academics matter. Everything matters. But I will say, especially on the men's basketball side, all of these players are represented by highly qualified and credentialed agents. So it is, crucial that you have strong ties and relationships with agents that your program can be in the game. If they have a player that may enter the portal that are looking to level up from a lower conference to, the Power Four, or one of their players that they're representing is just looking for a Power Four reset. We want them to know that, hey, we're in the game. We're going to be there financially from an NIL package standpoint. We feel like there's going to be basketball opportunities. So I do think those relationships matter a lot.
Yeah, I feel like that's a piece Rutgers has been missing until now. And Rutgers is not alone there. There's a lot of schools that have been adding GMs just precisely to connect that piece. Your impressions of Kelly's and what she's trying to do in terms of building some infrastructure. What do you think?
Kelly's been awesome, Jerry. And, in my first 2 months, I do think with Kelly ushering in and adapting and evolving Rutgers athletics into the current landscape and new era of college athletics has been incredible. So that model, that infrastructure is definitely there. And is she also bringing, innovative, forward thinking and different ideation of what has worked in her previous stops? Absolutely. But there's more stuff that Kelly's adding to the equation as well. As you know, these different loopholes and rules, and most recently there was mid-year transfers and certain programs having the ability to bring these guys in
Right.
mid-year. Well, we need to have a partnership with athletic administration. So as we approached Kelly with some of these scenarios and examples, she was incredible and wanted to partner with us and really just shared that, like, hey, as long as it's compliant, permissible, like, that's what we should be doing,
Yeah, and
trying
I feel like
to.
that maybe wasn't happening in the past. I know this was before your
Yeah.
time and before Kelly's time, but I feel like there was disconnect there that maybe there's some alignment there, like to use the word that's popular around Rutgers right now.
No, you're completely right. And, that really fired me up with that partnership that she said, yeah, let's go for it. Kelly's a competitor. She wants to win. So, I'm really excited and energized, from those conversations. And also just, making that partnership even stronger moving forward.
I hear from Rutgers fans a lot, of course, and I dialogue with them. And one thing I hear a lot this season is, yeah, we like a lot of these freshmen. They're showing a lot of promise, these younger players. But are we really going to be able to keep these guys? Or are they just going to run off at the end of the season and we'll have wasted playing time on them? What would your message to Rutgers fans be to Rutgers fans who are wondering if you can retain the guys you want to retain in the coming off season, Rob?
My message is 3 P's: plan, process, people. We're going to have a plan, we have a process, and we have the people. So if we start with the plan, that's just the overall strategy. It's going to be very prepared, organized. that's just the foundational baseline of taking everything into account of what we currently know with the landscape, different
Right.
trends, patterns. But that approach from a plan standpoint is very fundamental. And then we get to the process. We're going to have systems in place, and we're using all different metrics and data to evaluate, assess, and that process will be very detailed to make sure that, we're in the ballpark and we're in, the right framework to retain our current guys. And
Right.
the last bucket of people is that's internal. It starts with the basketball program from Coach Pikiell on down, that we have complete integration, collaboration, and synergy amongst the internal staff, that we're all aligned and we know what we need to do moving forward. And then secondly, the people, especially with Kelly and athletic administration, they're partnering with us as well to provide us the support and equip us with the right resources to compete in the Big Ten, not only to retain the current roster, but also to, attack the portal and bring some guys in. So I do think, that would be my message to fans. It's the 3 Ps: plan, process, and people.
All right, that's good. Easy to remember. Rob, any idea how the market's going to be this spring compared to last year? I mean, how do you even go about gauging that sort of thing? That seems to be an important but somewhat slippery thing to get your hands on.
Yeah, I think quantitatively, there's probably going to be more student athletes that enter the portal. And we know last year in the college landscape on the men's side, it was definitely over 2,000 student athletes entered the portal. So, we can assume that that number is going to be similar or more this off season. And honestly, it's not necessarily about how we're approaching or even gauging it. It goes back to, that relationship management, just
Right.
keeping players on the radar, keeping everything, on your pulse, talking to people within the business. And ultimately it's really about, what we want, and also what type of players that we're going to need in the portal. And ultimately, Jerry, we're all basketball fans. So we're watching games as fans and saying, like, man,
Right.
like, what's the identity of Rutgers basketball player? What type of player are we going to need possibly, in the portal? So I do think,
That's my next question, Rob. You're leading right into it, actually. You could probably do this interview yourself. What have you learned about what is a Steve Pikiell player, or what you're going to need going forward?
yeah, I think it's tough, competitive, physical, a willing defender, skilled. And honestly, that type of player, I think, does embody all of Coach Pikiell. And, a lot of coaches, the most successful ones, their roster embodies their personality. And the beauty of, moving forward in this new era of roster management with Rutgers basketball is, you know, Coach Pikiell has already developed and recruited great players, whether it be NBA draft picks in the lottery, defensive player of the year, all conference players, et cetera. So I think it really comes back to the culture of the program. And, from a standpoint of, you know, Coach Pikiell's program, the culture wasn't bought, it was built,
Yeah.
and really when, this new era of college athletics and NIL came, that's when it just changed, at Rutgers. So,
Right.
with Kelly's leadership and this new model in place and the infrastructure, the resources and support that are going to be provided, it's an exciting time for Rutgers basketball. But I think I have a good sense of the type of player and also style of play that Coach Pikiell wants to coach and how we want to play.
Yeah, and that's good, Rob. You said it, I think, very well. The culture was really built and refined, and then this big curveball comes in, and that's where you need help. And this is a lot of programs. Steve can coach basketball. Like, no, we all know this, but that making the right valuation so you can get the best combination of filling the need, getting the right culture guy. Like, that's where you'll come in and play a big role, and that's part of this brave new world we're in. So it's interesting to hear you sort of stack it all up like that, because it's certainly that's going to be an important job. Now, let's have a little fun about you being a Philadelphian. Okay, I live in South Jersey. Among those folks, I've learned to love them and all of their quirks. You're living in Bucks County, commuting for now. Obviously, I can't throw any shade on that. I'm coming from pretty far away too, but you do the job where you got to do the job. But first of all, and this is an important question, how did you handle the Eagles 49ers playoff game going off simultaneously with Rutgers Northwestern?
Great question, Jerry. Well, I was hanging with our deputy AD, chief of staff in athletics, and men's basketball administrator, Matt Colagiovanni. So
I
he
know,
was
Matt.
giving me some text updates about how the game was going on. So as we were playing Northwestern, I'll be very transparent and honest. I was glad the Rutgers Scarlet Knights got the win, and I'm a lifelong Philadelphian and huge Eagles fan. But I'm glad the Scarlet Knights, we pulled that one out. And in true Philadelphia fashion, Jerry, I got in my car right, after the game had ended, heading home, and sports talk radio was on fire, as you could imagine. It was pretty off the charts. So I got the
And it wasn't about Rutgers
45-minute ride
Northwestern.
home. Yeah, but
so the sequence was Rutgers wins the game in overtime, and then a few minutes later, the Eagles Niners ended. Very close game, right? The Eagles got close to the game-winning touchdown, and then that game ends. Well, we're in the interview room. You're getting in your car, whatever. We're in the interview room, and there was some hooting and hollering when that final score came in from one of the two people on this podcast, and not you, and Darren Buchanan. I don't know if he's a Redskins fan or what, but he was all in for the Niners.
So Jerry, that's funny, man. And Jerry, I got to be honest. In my lifetime, I've seen 3 world championships, a World Series, 2 Super Bowls. I'm good. And I know the competitive instinct of Philly, and but I've seen some special and magical moments, professionally. But it was a tough game for the Eagles. Just couldn't close that one out, and they're back to the drawing board for next year.
All right, what are you going to do about cheesesteaks when you're here? When you're in New Jersey, what is the plan there?
Great question. I got to lean on my colleagues, man. As much as I'm going to tell them about spots to visit in Philly for a steak, I'm going to talk to them to see where they recommend, and hopefully they're going to know I have a high standard for that cuisine, especially in Central Jersey. But Rob, I'm going to lean on those Rutgers folks.
First of all, you get big points for saying Central Jersey, because none of my in-laws or neighbors down here think that place exists. So God bless you for that. Good job. You're definitely on your way to becoming an honorary New Jerseyan with that reference. Secondly, don't take any advice from anybody, because you will not find a cheesesteak that compares in Central Jersey. And so, but if you were to take Steve Pikiell to one place in Philly for a cheesesteak, where would it be?
So I'm from Northeast Philly, grew up in Mayfair.
Am I going to hear D'Alessandro's?
No, I would take Coach Pikiell to Steve's Prince of Steaks.
Oh,
now, Steve's has, expanded over the years. They have South Jersey Shore locations, other locations in the Northeast. I would take Coach Pikes to the original to give him the full Northeast Philly experience. And, I'm loyal, very proud of where I come from in Northeast Philly. And Steve's Prince of Steaks is an amazing sandwich. There's some interesting elements to the Steve steak. It's not that I'm opposed to, chopped, and there's a lot of great, cheesesteak spots in Philly, as but Steve's is sliced ribeye, so it's not chopped.
I'm open to that.
They have American Whiz, they have.
Is an alternative to Whiz acceptable? Can you get just like regular American cheese or provolone or what?
You can. They have everything, but I would get. My order for Coach Pikes at Steve's Prince of Steaks would be a American with side of fries that are spicy and a cherry soda. And that's a really good order for Coach Pikes, and I think he would thoroughly enjoy it.
I'm going to get that myself, I think, as soon as I get a chance. No onions, though, in that order.
No, there's onions with. American with.
Onions with. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. I gets the whole thing. All right, good job. We'll have to take you up on that at some point. I like John's roast pork. I have not been to Steve's Prince of Steaks. John's roast pork in South Philly. I'm sure
John's is fantastic, and the owner of John's, there's a St. Joe's University connection, and that's a heck of a sandwich.
All right, Rob. So when the weather eventually warms up, remember if you're in Central Jersey, it sprinkles on your ice cream. And when you order Italian ice, it's Italian ice, not water ice. Water ice is what I'm looking at right now outside my window with the snow melting in my driveway. Pork roll, I think you're good. I think you're good in both places with pork roll. So, all right, good adjustments for Rob Sullivan, Philly guy. His application is in to be an honorary New Jerseyan. He can use this podcast appearance as evidence. Rob Sullivan, thanks for coming on Jersey Jump Shot, and from Iowa City, no less, where the Scarlet Knights will take on Iowa tonight. We'll see you soon back in Central Jersey.
Jerry, thanks for having me. Go RU.
All right, that was awesome. Love to hear from all kinds of people around the game. Went a little long. I appreciate Rob's time. He's super busy. A real character, a hoop lifer, and I think is going to be a vital piece to what Rutgers is building going forward. It seems like, from my impression, it seems like Rutgers is getting serious about stepping up their funding. You've seen Rutgers football being able to retain key players as their offseason began. That certainly comes from Kelly Zinn. And I've seen President William Tate at multiple men's basketball games, not something his predecessor, Jonathan Holloway, was all that much interested in. From what I can tell, Kelly Zinn and Steve Pikiell have a very good rapport. I do expect that the new regime will give Steve a chance to work with some real financial infrastructure in the offseason when putting a roster together, and having a GM like Rob is a key piece of that. If I'm Steve Pikiell, and he doesn't need me to tell him this, but I'm collaborating carefully with Rob Sullivan's valuations, especially with his valuations, which are so important come late March and April. You have to get the valuations right. It's not easy. It's not something coaches like Steve Pikiell and Shaheen Holloway too. It's not something this generation of coaches was trained to do. They were trained to evaluate basketball skills and fit, not basketball, not how much a guy's worth financially. Pikiell and Rutgers, they hit on Tariq Francis. Got to give him a lot of credit for that. They've missed that center. I mentioned Darren Buchanan, who's been playing well. He seems to be trending in the right direction. The next 2 months are going to be a continued tryout for the freshmen and sophomores. Not just whether Rutgers wants him to stay. I think Steve, if you ask Steve, gave him the truth serum, he would tell you, I want all these guys to stay. But the key is at what price, right? So, Steve likes developing guys, regardless, I think, of where they are on their talent arc, but it has to be at the right price in this new world. And it's about the asking price and the price negotiation. That stuff really matters. And, Rutgers is routinely facing teams this season that feature one guy who makes as much or as close to as much as their entire roster. So Rutgers is to get those valuations right. And they can't just throw money in the fireplace or in the air and hope it works, sticks against the wall. They got to get it right. On the court, they're going to take their licks on the road. Can they beat Indiana at home Friday? To me, that's a key potential morale boosting moment in the midst of a really tough 7-game gauntlet. They do need Dylan Grant to get healthy. He's been knocked down a few pegs by illness, which does happen. It is January, flu season. Indiana has one road win at Maryland. The RAC's been a house of horrors for them, although, let's face it, these are all new personnel, new coach. There's not a lot of institutional memory there, but Rutgers has played really well against Indiana. And they're a brand that I think fans are going to come out. And Rutgers fans have been coming out anyway. But I think you're going to get like the full student section, the full experience, RAC experience on a Friday night. Indiana's going to go into the teeth of a classic RAC probably, and so there's a chance to win a game. So, in this tough stretch, but it was great having Rob on. I'd like to hear that side of it, like that financial evaluation side is part of the game now. So he's our first general manager guest, and hopefully down the road we'll have more as they come aboard at various schools. Seton Hall. Shaheen Holloway, after Butler, wanted to project a clear message that we're fine, okay? I don't love everything we did. I'm not happy we lost the game. This isn't Ed Cooley who's saying it's great that we lost to UConn. I'm not happy we lost the game, but we're fine. We're 14-4. We're 4-3. Everybody's healthy. We're fine. And maybe he's right. And Butler was the perfect storm Butler, to their credit, played desperate and played well. They handled the ball great. That team's better than a 1-5 Big East team record that came in. They're better than that. I think that their metrics, Ken Palm, their net reflect that they're better than that. And so that was one. Butler was desperate, and they're pretty good. Okay, and they played well. You had the James Breeding factor. He's the worst official in the Big East. We know this. He was a crew chief for the worst officiated game I've ever seen, I've ever covered, which was the Seton Hall Marquette Big East semifinal in 2019, where Seton Hall won, and all these ejections and foul outs and terrible officiating. That was James Breeding. Okay, he's a whistle happy guy. His games usually have a high foul count, and that played a part in it too. Seton Hall is really dependent on the whistle. A tight whistle really hurts them more than most teams. And like Seton Hall missing a lot of putbacks hurts. I mean, we know they're not a good 3-point shooting team, but missing those putbacks, 21-5 on the offensive glass, I mean, that's almost always a win. And definitely not an 11-point loss at home. 21-5 on the offensive glass. Ask any coach in America, would they sign for 21-5 advantage on the offensive glass without knowing the final score? Would I sign for that without knowing the final score, thinking I'm going to win? They would say, yes, I'll sign for that regardless of whatever I'm shooting it from the field. But you got to put some of those in. Seton Hall didn't put enough of those back in, and they've been good at that this season. Not a good shooting team, but they've been pretty good at putting the ball back in. And so they didn't do a good job with that. They weren't strong with the ball or threw up a lot of bricks around the tin. They missed a lot of point-blank shots. So that was, I think, a big part of that loss also. And I want to discuss the no student fans because I made a real issue out of this. And I want to say this, and I know it rubbed some people the wrong way, and that's fine. Sometimes you're going to do that in this job. I write about fans a lot. I have told my students over the years that the reporter's job, what the reporter's main jobs, sports writers' main jobs are twofold. When you're covering a beat like this, when you're covering a game, fans watch the game on TV. Okay, they watch it on TV. They have the box score at their disposal, constantly updated. They know the stats. They know what happened in the game. What they don't know is what they need the reporters for is, one is the press conference to ask questions to get answers. That's important. And two is, I think my thing is, you need to, for the atmosphere in the arena, like for those fans, the vast majority of fans who aren't in the arena, to me, the atmosphere is important. I make that a big part of my reporting. And over the years, I've always made a takeaway, like the atmosphere and the fans. And 99% of the time, 98% of the time, it's about how great the fans are and what a difference they made. And no one ever complains when I write, the fans helped push the team over the top. The fans energized the team. The fans intimidated the refs. The fans played a huge part in this win. And I think that's true. I think it doesn't always happen. Fans don't set screens, and fans don't play defense, and fans don't put the ball in the basket. They don't make free throws. But I do think fans in college basketball, especially with the close proximity to the court, I think fans sway some outcomes. And I think the reverse is also true. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes when a team has a dead home environment, that's beneficial to the visitor who comes into like a quasi-neutral or not a really fierce visiting environment. And I think that's really huge with the officiating. Sports Illustrated they had a fantastic, back when Sports Illustrated was good, they had a fantastic story a few years ago using data and interviewing psychologists and people in officiating and former officials about how the biggest impact home court has, home field, home court, especially home court, the biggest reason for the home court advantage is the officiating. The fans can impact officiating. It's human nature for the officials to sort of, go along with the fans or maybe change slightly due to the crowd reaction. It's just human nature. And so I don't have all the data in front of me, but there was pretty convincing argument. And so Butler shot 41 free throws to Seton Hall's 25. All right. Seton Hall was called for 27 fouls. That is an enormous disparity. It was 13-3 in the first half. That is an enormous disparity for a home team to be on the negative side of, and very unusual. And I can't help but think if there were students at the game, there were enough regular fans there. It was bad weather. For 6,500 or so, almost 7,000 regular fans to show up was fine. This wasn't regular fans. They did what they normally do. They were fine. And the people who didn't come because they couldn't drive, that's fine. It was snowing. You got to drive. It's the students not being there, the students not being able to ride the refs, the students no showing when they had free busing to the game. They had free busing. They don't have to drive there. That to me was just a cardinal sin, a huge failure. The Seton Hall students failed the team. And I really just don't think this was a one-off. Now, look, I've been coming to Seton Hall games since I was in high school. I've been in the student section. I've been, covering the team for 23 years. This has not always been a problem for Seton Hall. They're going to be, is someone going to confuse them with, Purdue? No. The Mackey Arena? No. The student section there? No. We're not comparing those apples to oranges. But I have seen Seton Hall through the years and well into their transition to Newark, which is to me a big upgrade from the Meadowlands. Closer, better arena. I have seen Seton Hall students come in good, solid, reputable, game-altering numbers, okay, through Kevin Willard's regime as recently as 2021, 2022. They had 2,200 students come to the Rutgers game. They had almost 2,000 students at that Texas game. This was like 5 years ago. 5 years ago. It wasn't ancient history. They were still busing from campus. Okay. Nothing really had changed. There was the same situation it is now. You bus in, the tickets cost whatever nominal amount they cost. You bus in and you support your school. And Seton Hall students were good at that. For a small school with an off-campus arena in an inner city, Seton Hall students have done well with that right up until the last couple years. And in 2024, when Seton Hall's making, for some reason it fell off. And in 2024, when Seton Hall's making an NCAA tournament push with Kadari Richmond and Al Dawes and, the Dre Davis, the students' fan support was not there. And I heard all kinds of BS excuses. It's Valentine's Day. It's Wednesday night. Students have classes. It's too early on Saturdays. It's too cold out. It's raining. I heard all the excuses. And the conclusion I kind of drew at the end was they don't care. The students just stopped caring. The culture at the school was not the students was not to support the team. And you could say this is because, of NIL and students, the transferring and whatnot. But this is not the case elsewhere. If that was true, it'd be the case everywhere. You think Providence is going to be ranked in the top 25 and 14-3, and they're going to have no students show up to a home game on a Saturday? That's unthinkable. Have you seen Providence's student section? So, to me, this was just a huge failure. And the only conclusion I could draw is that the culture is rotten on Seton Hall's campus with the students. It's a rotten culture, and that's why no students are coming. So I don't know that it's the athletic department's fault. I don't think it's their fault, but it does kind of fall on them to try to incentivize students to come. They did a good job with UConn. That was UConn. I get it, number 3 in the country, but they did have a pretty cool giveaway with the jerseys. They've had Greek nights where they've had fraternity and sorority recognition. That has helped. They're going to have to come up with more gimmicks, man, because the students just don't care. And for them not to support this team, all right, you can say, well, they don't want to see a bunch of missed three-pointers. Well, then they're just dumb fans, because this team plays as hard or harder than any team in the country. If you can't support good defense, everybody playing their hearts out, crashing the boards, if you can't support that, a team that's 14-4, and then something's wrong with you. When basketball is what your school is known for. So I think there's something rotten in Denmark with the students, and I don't know if it's fixable. But the athletic department, this is not what I do for a living. They got to figure out some more. They got to just gimmick their way through this season, because this team, they did not play well against Butler. Okay, they didn't shoot well. A lot went wrong. This team has played its heart out and deserves better from their students and their peers. And this is not about the regular fan. I've seen the same regular fans coming for years at Generation X, Millennial, your younger baby boomer fan. They're doing fine. They're doing their thing. They go to the road games. They go to Georgetown. They go to the trip over Thanksgiving. They'll show up at the NCAA tournament and the Big East tournament. Those people are always there. It's a small school. It's not going to be a humongous base. It's the students that are hurting the program right now, and that needs to be addressed. Okay, I'm not going to back down on that. It's not. All right. So back to Holloway. If he's been pushing back a little bit on my questions in the press conferences. I asked him about Bud Clark's fouls, the rotation, player pairings may be changing to avoid that mid-first half swoon. I just ask what I think fans want to know, what I want to know, what fans want to know. It's part of my job. Not every coach is going to like every question, but he does seem to be annoyed with some of the questions. I'm going to try to keep asking what I think is important. And, so is he going to make wholesale changes? No. And maybe he's right not to do so. There's nothing wrong with asking that question, but maybe he's right not to do it. I mean, AJ Staten McRae, he played much better against Butler. That's a positive to come out of that game. And I mentioned in my write-up, Alamir Dawes, my write-up of Butler, Alamir Dawes, who was in a really rough stretch, his senior year in non-conference shots stuck with him, and he wound up really being a key behind their late season surge and winning the NIT. There's something to be said for sticking with guys, and that helps giving them confidence. And if that's Shaw's way, that's fine. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with asking about it, though. So, St. John's now, and the good news is Seton Hall will be away from home, okay, because they have not played well and they have not shot well at the Rock. I broke down the splits today, and I put them in my preview for the St. John's game. I'm going to read them here real quick. 8 games at the Rock, Seton Hall has shot 40.9% from the field, okay? Away neutral games, 7 games, Seton Hall has shot 46.6%, almost a full 6% higher. That's a huge difference. 46.6% compared to 40.9% from the field. From the field, that's a huge difference. Okay, that's an enormous difference. Games can rise and fall, win and lose on that difference. I threw Walsh in here, just as 3 games against low majors, mid majors, 424 from the field. So somewhere in between, a little closer to the Rock. All right, 3-point shooting percentage at the Rock, 8 games, 26.8%. That's poor. By any measure, that's poor. Away from the Rock, away neutral games, 7 games, they've shot 30.8% from the field. It's not great, but it's much more serviceable. And 30.8% away from the Rock, 26.8% at the Rock. That's a big difference. In Walsh, 38.5%. They shot the 3-ball really well in Walsh. But the bottom line is they don't shoot well at the Rock. They're not a great shooting team. They don't shoot well. They shoot the worst at the Rock. I don't know why that is. They don't get in there to practice much, but they don't get into some of these. They don't get these away neutral sites to practice much either. But for whatever reason, this team doesn't shoot well at the Rock. And that's why, maybe they'll be better off, honestly, in the Garden from a shooting perspective. Doesn't mean they'll win the game. St. John's is good. That's 2 teams on the court. But maybe I think they're probably going to shoot the ball better because they're away from home. I'm serious about that. And Zuby Ejiofor versus Najai Hines is a great matchup inside. Great matchup. Najai's playing so well lately. You see the tremendous promise in him. Played well against Butler, too. So, that should be fun to watch. He's coming on strong. It's a long season, folks. Guys are going to go through slumps, and there's going to be guys who have good stretches and bad stretches, hot hands, cold hands. Having 10 guys, you can afford a couple guys to be a little off. You're going to lose some games too. It's a long season. I do agree with Sean, his main point, but Seton Hall does have to foul less. They're going to have to foul less because these Big East refs are wise to this, and they're going to look for this stuff, and especially with Bud Clark. They're going to have to foul less. You're going to have to figure out a way to defend hard with fouling less. And they're going to make their layups. And this is not rocket science, but you're fighting hard for these offensive boards. You're going to have to put them back in and not kick him out for a brick 3-pointer. They got to go right back in. I don't know that Seton Hall is going to take a huge jump as a shooting team from the outside, but they can definitely do better than they did against Butler, making those layups and putbacks at the rim. And that's a big thing. So that's my Seton Hall roundup. And then, of course, I don't think they'll win at St. John's, but I give them a chance. I expect a good game at the Garden. And then you go to DePaul, and you kind of really, you have to win that game. You don't want to have a 4-game losing streak. DePaul's playing better. So Seton Hall does have to get on their horse a little bit this week. It is a long season. Mid-major rundown. St. Peter's 8-1 in the MAC. The Peacocks lead the nation in steals. How about that? Playing great defense. Bashir Mason. What a season he's having. What a coach. Had built Wagner to a winner and has kept the fire burning at Run Baby Run Arena after inheriting a tough big shoes to fill from Shaheen Holloway. NJIT is playing great. NJIT is 4-1 in the America East Conference. Sebastian Robinson, the Pride. Yes, they beat Bryant today. Sebastian Robinson, the Pride of Roselle Catholic, is on a tear. Okay, so keep an eye on NJIT, 4-1. Grant Billmeyer has them on the move. We knew he would. Monmouth improves to 3-3 in the CAA. They handled Northeastern on today, Martin Luther King Day. How about 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals, and 7 3-pointers by sophomore guard Justin Ray. Talk about a guy coming out of nowhere. So Monmouth's got weapons. Princeton, 2-1 in the Ivy League. Look out for sophomore forward center Malik Abdullahi, who I've talked about since the preseason. He's taking the next step. He's that next versatile Princeton big who can rebound, score, and pass. He's the next guy there. So that is so Princeton doing well. Okay, we're keeping an eye on them. FDU in the Northeast Conference. They beat Wagner today. Okay, Joey Niesman, point guard, floor general. They were high on his acquisition in the offseason. He was a floor general they needed. And FDU's 3-3 in the NEC. Congrats to Ryder for getting their first D1 win, beating Iona. So there's a lot going on. High majors, mid majors. When we started this season, we thought there would be 0 NCAA tournament teams from New Jersey. Now we've got several contenders. It's getting interesting. Thanks to Rob Sullivan for coming on, Rutgers GM. We will continue to have our guests, more players, more hoops talk, and I know you'll be here with me, and for that, I'm grateful. Thanks, as always, and we'll see you soon on Jersey Jump Shot.